Hello and welcome to the Mums Mean Business interview series presented by Business Crowd. I'm Laura Morrison and today I'm going to be interviewing Amy Beeson. Amy has excellent expertise on publishing, having been the co-author and publisher of a book, and also has a creative branding and communications agency, Wordsby. So Amy, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about your journey into entrepreneurship.
Yes, hi, thank you. It started actually with having a baby and becoming a mum. And I'd always thought that I would like to write a book. And I did write a book while I was on maternity leave. But it wasn't the book that I thought it would be. My mum is a health visitor. And while I was pregnant and then had a new baby, she was sending me lots of advice. And it was so popular with all my friends, and they passed it on to their friends. And that I started to edit it when my little girl got to about 6 months old in her nap times. And by the end of my maternity leave, we had sort of like a really good half of a parenting book together. And I thought, oh, you know, like I'd already met literary agents and had quite a few people give me their card and be interested in short stories and poetry and things that I'd written because I've got an MA in English Literature and Creative Writing. And just before I was due to go back to my job, which was in the civil service in communications, I emailed a literary agent a proposal for this parenting book at 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday. I thought, oh, I'll never hear from him again. And at 9 o'clock the next morning, he was on the phone to my mum and me saying, I'd really like to sign you to our literary agency. Can you come in and see me? So that was really surprising and really unexpected because, you know, you always hear how hard it is to get a book deal. And I think we had a very easy journey in that terms. You know, that's the first step if you're going down the traditional publishing route, is getting an agent, and he's a very experienced agent, so that helped enormously. But I think what it was is because I'd worked very hard to put the proposal together for him about what the book was about. So I think that really paid dividends, and then he could take that to publishing houses. And we had several publishing houses bidding for the book. The publisher that we went with was HarperCollins, who didn't just want the parenting book, they also wanted 2 memoirs of my mum's early life when she was trained to be a nurse, and then she was a very young health visitor in the 1970s. And for me that was terribly exciting because, you know, I've always wanted to write books and an author, and that's a bit more dramatic, but it's totally not what I was expecting. So I handed in my notice for my job and then left, and then was like, oh, I've got to write 3 books now. But I think also, like, I didn't want to lose all the communications and branding and campaign skills. And also, you know, like writing, we got a good advance and we got a good deal, but it's a long-term project. It's a 3-year project. So I started my own business, Wordsby, which works one-to-one with a lot of startups and small businesses, but also arts organisations and charities on their brands, their campaigns and their creative identity for marketing and for corporate communications.
And tell me a little about the types of brands that you're attracting with the approach that you take, Amy, and what's unique about the approach and how you've built and brought your experience from corporate communications and blended that with your more arts and creative background.
I think having that very strong creative background, but also being a mum myself and having to have a business that I love to do, it has been very influential because a lot of the clients that I have are values-based businesses. You know, their businesses are very important to them. They've often got a very strong talent that they're trying to develop through services, through their own businesses, or perhaps, you know, if they're a theatre company, that they're making art that they care about deeply. So I think that emotive storytelling, being able to create brands and marketing campaigns that really speak to people and tell stories through language and strong messaging, but also design. I work with a really talented creative brand designer called Divya Venkatesh, and she's fantastic. And I think together we've created some like really lovely work that I don't know if I was still in corporate, whether I'd get the opportunity to really engage with those people one-on-one. Often when you're in that agency setup, you're working on an agency model, and regardless of the client, how you put marketing and brands together is already pre-decided. You can't flex it around a client. Whereas for me, because it's my business, I can work very differently from client to client. So, you know, some clients want it very quickly. They've got deadlines they're trying to meet, they've got targets, they're very confident about what they want. They might already have worked with an analyst or a marketeer or a coach, and actually coming to me is providing a creative service. Other people, where it's a startup, you know, I mean, I'm sure you recognise this, starting your own business can be very filled with anxiety. So setting the pace for developing a brand, an approach to marketing that they completely understand and can essentially deliver after I've gone is really important, and that might need to be at a much slower pace. Whereas if you're in the traditional brand creative communications agency model, they could never afford, because you can't say, oh well, we'll spend a day on it this month, and next month we'll have 3 days on it, and then the following month we'll spend half a day on it. It's just not achievable. They've got a retainer, they have to spend so much per month, or they're never going to be able to access those services. So I think for me it's really nice to be able to deliver quite high level brand language services, but for businesses where it makes such a difference to them doing that. You know, sometimes in the corporate world you produce really amazing work, and it gets a lot of recognition, but you know, you don't get that connectivity because it's just another account to somebody, whereas this is somebody's business, so it means so much to them. So I much prefer that.
It's that thing about working with the clients at a deeper level to get a really great understanding of their objectives and identity, which gives a brand longevity, which means that they're able to identify with and connect with their audiences much more readily. It's interesting what you say about the startups that are attracted to you are coming from a values-based approach. One of the things that I've noticed in my work with women and entrepreneurs is, particularly when we become mothers, we do go through a real questioning, a real perhaps sometimes shift in values, because I think bringing children into the world means that we begin to really sit back and look at things quite differently, like our impact on the world, like impact on the planet. Is that something that you find with your clients?
Absolutely. I find that, you know, in the same way that I want to work with people in quite a personal, meaningful way, they want to work in the same way with their own clients, and feeling that you are doing something that benefits other people. And you know, it's not just about that big corporate world of profit and loss and balance sheets, and not seeing your audience as people. Like, we spend a lot of time in the values-based and identity work talking about audience, but not talking about audience in, you know, the way perhaps we did it in marketing, you know, like in the last decade, like in quite a cynical way. This is much more going, what's really special about that audience? What is it that I offer that really will connect with that audience, and they'll enjoy using my service or my products? And I think that makes people very proud of what they're producing. And certainly when you're a mother, you know, the time that you put into your business is time away from your family. So having a business that's values-based is quite nurturing for you, I think, as a woman and as a professional. You can feel that you're showing your children that women can still work when they become mothers, and they can still do amazing things. And actually they can do things in their own way, in their own terms, and be quite proud of yourself.
That's really interesting. With your daughter, you have one daughter, Amy. Does she understand the business? How do you explain the business to her?
He does understand it to some extent. I mean, with the books, it was really funny. Like only yesterday, she said to me, when I grow up and I get married and I have a baby, I'm going to my laptop and write books in my flat. And I was like, oh, are you? That's nice. You don't have to do that, but that's kind of sweet. But also on the branding side, particularly because she only started school last year, so she's always kind of been around it, and I think we take for granted how much they take in. Like my daughter knows what a mood board is and can start to put one together, like for her own birthday party or something. She'll start like collecting images and go, oh, we could try this or we could do this. And it was really funny. I was doing something with Divya, the other half of my creative team, and we were animating an advert, and it was a GIF. And my little girl came over and she went, oh, that should just fly over here. And we were like, oh yeah, that really should. That would be much better. So I think it's that thing, like I try not to let it dominate too much what we do, but I think children learn through experience, and by being passionate about our work and enjoying our work and them seeing that, it's actually quite a nice introduction to work that isn't just based on, you know, you go to school, you do exams and you go and do your job. It's actually seeing people love what they do, and I think that's really beneficial for children, whether that's your job or whether that's, you know, enjoying cooking with your children or art with your children. It's just having a much more integrated family life.
I think that's absolutely, you've hit the nail on the head. It's that word integration of the family life, because my children understand, you know, I've got things to do. They know that after they go to bed that quite often I'll be doing bits and pieces, but they also know that that enables me to spend time with them in the afternoon and when they come back from school. You know, they really do get it and understand. You have to put it in slightly simpler language, but actually it's something I find incredibly useful to use with my clients as an exercise. Is how would you describe what you do to a 5-year-old? Because I think if we can connect with that playfulness, we can actually really look at what we are doing, what impact we're making. It's really, really interesting to see how children do influence. And I think it's fantastic that your daughter's doing mood boards and creating and contributing to the campaigns you're doing.
Yeah, they'd never believe you. You know, like when I, you know, like if I say to someone, oh, she's done a mood board for her birthday party, they'd never believe me, but she totally has. She's decided what she wants, you know, like what she's going to get together. She's gotten, you know, magazines and things and cut things out and put them together, and I think, you know, because obviously she probably gets that more from my designer than she does from me, in seeing her work. But I think it's really lovely, and certainly when the first book came out, my little girl wasn't even 2, so she was still very much, you know, with me, like physically needing me in a way that, you know, I couldn't really leave her. So I always made sure her needs were met and that she had time and I had time with her, and we organised interviews around her day. So when was a good nap time for her? But she came to radio stations with us and she absolutely loved it. And I remember one day I was on BBC London in the afternoon show, actually talking about being a working mum, and I said to Harriet Scott, who was interviewing me, and I was on with Anna Watkins, the Olympian, and I said, I've spent all morning walking around London Zoo to make sure my child had enough exercise and fresh air, so she's asleep for the half an hour that I'm on with you, and the researcher was watching her on the other side of the glass, and it all kind of worked. And I said, you know, that's the thing with mothers, they could plan military operations. So much thought goes into making sure that all those bits connect up so you can go off and do your job and your child's needs are met. It doesn't happen by magic. It takes a lot of thought, actually, and a lot of consideration. I mean, in some ways, that is what makes me really good at my job, is that ability to think, what do people need? What do people need to hear to make them feel secure and comfortable and connected? It's exactly the same thing I do with my child. It's just in a slightly different context.
Absolutely. It's transferable skills, that foresight, that planning. And actually it's strategic planning, isn't it? It's exactly what we do when we're planning a strategy. We take the long range view, we look at, okay, what could go right, what could go wrong, what do we need to do to mitigate those things? And this is where women, I think, have got so many fantastic skills to bring into businesses, to bring into the workforce after they've had children. I mean, it's great to see so many businesses now are starting to step up and look at re-engaging women who've left to have children. But also, I think it's fabulous to see women actually taking control and taking ownership and designing their own careers that fit around what freedom means to them.
Yeah, and I think that's a shifting thing. And just like in being a parent, it's constantly shifting, isn't it? Like what your child needs, how you manage family life, it shifts constantly. And for me, so does my business. What's right for me this month isn't necessarily exactly right for me next month, and that's okay. It's my business. I don't have to have it in a particularly 9 to 5 structured way. If I don't want to, if I do, and that's actually how I'm most productive, that's perfect. But I mean, it's the Easter holidays now. I'm not working at the same level that I will be working in 2 weeks' time, but I'm okay with that. I did the preparation for it beforehand. I made sure people knew I was away. I've planned stuff to do when I get back. They're really strong planning skills, and about setting expectations for yourself and for your clients. And I think they're incredibly valuable. And I was talking to someone who's a consultant, he's very high up in a accountancy firm, and he was saying that he knows when someone comes in and they're a director and they're a mother, they mean business, because they've only got so many times to get the meeting done. They want to see results in the time that they're there. They don't want to mess about and go down the pub and chat over a pint. They want to see results. And I think that's the same with me. I can get so much done in a few hours that I think if in a corporate context would have taken me much longer, because not only would I've worked with quite the same energy to get stuff done, but I'd also have been surrounded in the corporate world with a lot of process and meetings that I don't have to have in my own business. I don't have to spend a ridiculous amount of time in meetings that don't really get that much done. So I think that's really to be celebrated. I think I'd really struggle now going back into the civil service. I think I'd find the whole meeting schedule really difficult if I didn't know what the outcomes were going to be at the end of the meeting.
Absolutely. So how do you use and translate that thinking with your clients, obviously looking at the objectives that they want to achieve, because there's many different approaches to achieving getting your voice out there as a business and as a brand. So what would you say you try and steer your clients towards in terms of looking at measurable objectives and things that make impact in their business?
Yeah, so for me, because obviously the output is always going to be that they've got a brand and then ultimately a campaign that they deliver to launch their business, it very much starts with what are your values. Then I do a lot of word mapping and word exploration to find the words that kind of express that. Then we go back and look at tone of voice, look at proposition, that one word sentence that really explains what it is that you do. And alongside of that, really thinking about who is your audience, what are they called, how old are they, where do they shop, what do they wear, understanding them and naming them, looking at their competitors within that landscape and working out what makes them stand out as different from their competitors. And that really is the very beginning of brand language. And at that point then you go, so what should you be called, what should your strapline be? And then that gets handed over to a designer who then does the other side of creative branding, which is logo, colour palette, typography, graphic device, use of imagery and layout. And essentially those are all the components in creative branding that gives you your creative brand. It's amazing when clients get to that point of view. It's actually quite exhausting for them in the beginning. When you sit down in your first workshop and you start talking about, so what's important to you, who's your audience, they're normally exhausted at the end of it, but very excited. And then about a week later, they're normally ready to hop on to the next stage.
Mm-hmm.
And then once all that put together, then you can start to plan your first campaign. So what's your key messages? What's the offer that you're selling? But because you've done all that development to really understand them and their clients, that's the fun bit, because that's the storytelling. So every campaign that we put together will take all those different bits of the identity from language and design and start to tell really exciting stories that then gets applied to advertising, but also to their website, to communications that they're going to be putting out there, making sure they've got a really exciting favicon and a Twitter background and all those little bits and pieces from creative branding that really gives an impact as to what they are. And I'm still really in favour of having a brilliant business card. I mean, my business card's a bit funny. It's got a lion on the front and it says, "Hello, I'm Amy and I'm a professional lion tamer." And I don't think I've ever had somebody not immediately turn it over to see what the punchline was. So yeah, that's right for me, because it's my personality. A different brand would have a completely different calling card. But I think your business card should work really hard to almost be like the beginning of a promise, the beginning of a story about what you could be doing with the person that you've handed it over to.
Oh wow, that's really interesting, because I don't use business cards, Amy. I don't, but my thing is dare to be different, and that is one of the things that's different about me, is I don't, and I connect in different ways with my clients. So there you go. But one of the things we were having a little chat about earlier was the importance of books and using books as part of your strategy for branding, particularly if you're somebody who's trying to create a strong personal brand in a particular niche. Could you just talk about that a little for us, and maybe some of the pros and cons, because I know a lot of people consider whether they ought to go quickly and down the self-publishing route or whether they need to go with a traditional publisher depending on the market that they're in. What are your thoughts on that based on the experiences that you've had with HarperCollins?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of that, if you want to be published because you want to be seen as an expert in your field, then a book definitely does that. But I would also think that if you are an expert, it's very tricky, isn't it? Because when you have an imprint like HarperCollins, I think part of the message is that your book must have been seen and by a certain number of people who judge it to be good, that it's worth publishing. And then, you know, the fact that then Waterstones picks it up, that it's worth selling. And so that's already gone through quite a lot of processes. It doesn't necessarily mean that that book really is any better than one that someone self-published, but I suppose it's the psychology, you know, like when you go into a bookshop, you think, well, this must be worth at least picking up. It's in the bookshop. So that's kind of tricky. And if you're an expert, I can see how that then becomes even more important. But it kind of depends what you're an expert in, because if you're an expert in something that's very word marketing communications based, it might be right for you to go down the self-publishing route, because that's your expertise. You're almost showcasing how well you can publish something, how well you can market something yourself to the buying audience. But if your expertise is somewhere very different from that and you don't have those skills for making sure it really is marketed well, then it might not be the best route for you. So I think it really depends straight away on what skill set you have to make sure that book works. Even though I'm actually from a marketing background and I could self-publish, because ultimately, as well as the parenting stuff, I'm writing memoir, and then eventually I'll probably move into fiction. For me, I like having that it's a big publisher and it's a well-known publisher, and the access that then gives you to different networks within publishing and PR and you know, talking about your book in a different way. I think it's kind of easier to maybe get that PR platform to talk about your book if it's with a publisher. I think then you also have to ask yourself, why are you publishing the book? So whether you choose to do traditional publishing or self-publishing would really come into that. If it's just that, you know, you want to do it in a way that will get your ideas across to an audience, you've already got a ready-made audience who'll buy it, you've thought through all the costs of printing, or whether it's an ebook or what you're doing, again, it might be the right route for you. So it's really thinking about, you know, why is it I'm publishing a book? Is it that I want it? Because the whole thing of publishing, if it's about money and you want to make a lot of money in publishing, then how that's done, I think, is obviously through having a big PR campaign. So is it a book that a lot of people are going to buy, or is it just a book that a few people are going to buy? Is it something that will go into supermarkets? Because books do well, you know, like the book that I did with my mum, The New Arrival, which was her memoir, was in Asda, it was in WH Smith's, it was in Waterstones, it was in their charts. That means they're actually selling, you know, hundreds if not thousands of copies per week when a book comes out, rather than publishing it yourself and maybe shifting a few copies per week. So I think that's, you know, that's quite important to actually be realistic about what you're trying to achieve with publishing a book. And ultimately, like, how do you want to feel about it? Like, for me, books are everything. I'm a writer, it's all about words. So things like the quality of the paper really matters to me. The front cover really matters to me. You know, what reviewers say probably does matter to me. You know, but does it matter to you as somebody else? You know, is it that, you know, you want it to be received in that way? Or is it very much about just connecting with that niche audience that you've already got for your business? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was interesting, you were talking about the whole marketing side of things. How would you, if a client was coming to you with books as part of the strategy, communicate with them the things around publisher expectations now? Because now that we live in a world dominated by social media, it seems, in the business world, I think perhaps there's a lot more for authors to do, as we were saying earlier, beyond writing the book.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a huge amount for authors to do. I mean, I've worked with a number of authors being published now in different routes. So some have grants, some are with publishing houses. And I know even quite successful authors who perhaps were did really well, you know, 10 or 15 years ago, but publishing has changed and they maybe don't engage with social media. And they don't engage with PR, and then their publisher says, well, you know, you don't have any followers, you're not even on Twitter. You know, we that's what we expect now from our authors. We expect them to be accessible. Communications works now in a way where people expect that from some authors. And, you know, if you're already riding high, if you're, you know, a really huge author, you don't need to. But everybody else, if you want a lot of people to access your work, then you need to do that. If you don't mind, if you're publishing books because you just want to publish books and you just want to get your work out there, and you're not really bothered about how many people it reaches, then you don't need to worry about comms. But if you do want it to reach people and you do want a publisher to pick it up, then you need to start thinking really early on, before you even submit it to the publishing house or the literary agent, how well are you doing on social media? Do you understand who your audience would be for this book? How do you pitch this book to journalists? How do you pitch this book to Waterstones? Who's going to buy your book? Where do you see it sitting within the bookshop? These are all questions that they ask you at the first stage of publishing now, and if you don't know the answers, it's really difficult, particularly when often people who do write, you know, if you're like me and you're from marketing, you know, great, but you might not be. It might not be your thing. It might be really uncomfortable for you, and that's fine. But it's worth thinking, how much are you comfortable in doing this, and do you need to talk quite early on to somebody about how you give your book the best shot? Because I don't know, because my book got picked up, but I would imagine getting rejection letters is pretty horrible. So, you know, if that's really going to cut you quite badly, try to get yourself in the best possible position before you even show your book to somebody.
And that sounds like something that you worked out as we were talking about the advanced planning skills. You'd worked that out at the point where you went and approached the literary agent.
Yeah. When I approached the literary agent, I sent a proposal that had so you do your best 4 chapters, but before that you have a really good synopsis that explains what your book's about. Then you say, I see the audience for this book being, you know, I think it could be marketed this way. I've got the potential to connect with people in this respect. You know, I'm very happy to work on Twitter. I'm happy to do Twitter parties. I'll go on webinars. You know, I've got connections on, you know, the radio. I'm happy to go and do radio interviews, because you are competing. You know, a PR department in a publishing house has an awful lot of authors that they're launching every single week, and
you've got to bring social capital and network.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, you know, like I often say to authors, like, it's really good to do events. It's really good to get involved in exhibitions. Like my mum, Sarah Beeson, she speaks at the Baby Show. She's at Bump Fest. She's at the Baby Sleep Show. She goes to Mother's Coffee Mornings. Actually, she really loves engaging with mothers. For her, it's an absolute joy. And I think that comes across. And that's the other aspect, isn't it, of having a values-based business or product, is you want to feel authentic. So if it doesn't feel authentic, then you might need to think a little bit, you know, if you're not comfortable going and standing on a stage or talking to a group of people you don't know, you need to find the way that you can do it so it feels authentic to you. Because if you're faking it, your audience will know. I love Twitter. I absolutely love chatting to people on Twitter. I love finding out who my readers are and what their children's names are and all those sorts of things. I really genuinely love it. And I think that comes across. So you have to find the channels where you can really show what you do in the best light and really connect with your audience. But it's tricky, you know, it's really, really tricky. And obviously it feels scary. And I think when it's your work, when it's your business, when it's your book, it can feel really personal. But it's just like it is with branding. When we work with branding or our business, I always think it's a bit like, you know, you put on your superhero cape of what it is that you do within your job. It isn't necessarily who you are when you're giving your kids a bath or you know, making them a Sunday dinner, but it is part of you, and you just do that as best as you can and not worry too much that you're, you know, that it's personal, because I think that's when people worry. Like, writing is quite a personal thing for a lot of people. So, you know, they can feel a bit scared, because then when people criticize you, that's really hard. But one thing I would say about being a mum and mums in business and other women who read books is actually they can be a very, very supportive community. So finding your support networks wherever they exist, you know, online or in your locality or in your profession, really, really helps you find the right niche to start to talk, get feedback, market, test what it is that you're going to offer.
And I think it's really interesting as well, you speaking about your mum and her connection with this, because she's obviously very much part of what you've done in that journey to your entrepreneurship. And how is it working with your mother?
My mum's amazing. I mean, my mum is an amazing person and a very inspirational person. So my mum's Sarah Beeson, MBE. She's health sister. She went off to be a nurse when she was 17 years old, and she's had an amazing life and done amazing things, and is a very positive person. And I think one of the reasons she connects so well with parents is she says this is the best generation of parents there's ever been. People have never cared more about their children. People have never done things more in their own way. She said this generation have so much, you know, in the way that we're doing our business, in a way that feels right for us, because people are parenting in a way that works for their family. And what's right for your family isn't right for your sister's family or your neighbour's family. It's what's right for you. So she's a very empowering, supportive person. So I'm always incredibly proud of her when we're doing the baby book, Happy Baby, Happy Family. It's amazing. But I'm very much in a supportive role in that. I don't give advice to anybody on how to be a parent, because I've just got one child, and I very much leave that to my mum, because she's a health visitor and she has the medical background and the psychology and all those kind of, you know, much vaster knowledge than I have. And then with the memoir, it's a bit reversed. So obviously she tells me her stories, but I write them. So when we take The New Arrival and our book that's coming out later this year, She's Arrived Out, I do the readings. So I stand up and read a chapter from the book to the audience. But Sarah, my mum, takes the questions, because generally their questions for her. You know, there might be the odd question for me about writing, but generally it's people who've connected with her story and they want to ask her more about it. So it's really wonderful, and I love working with her. It's like the best job ever. I'm home at the moment, and I was writing this morning, and you know, she sort of comes up and she reads what I do, and she makes a few suggestions. But I think because I know her so well and we're very close, like I genuinely get it right. Where I get it wrong is where it's technical. You know, where it's medical, that's much harder because she'll go, can't do this, and it doesn't work like that, and we don't handle it, we don't do that. But where it's emotional, I normally get it right, you know, in how it feels to do her job, in how the mothers that she works with feel. I can completely identify with that story. That's what I do in my job anyway. So yeah, it's wonderful. I love it. It's the best job ever.
Fabulous. I think it's really interesting, this intergenerational thing of business. And I mean, the other thing is as well, it does matter so much to have family support when you're creating a business. I know certainly I couldn't do half of what I did if I didn't have my in-laws close by. It's really, really important that you've got that and that understanding, I think, when you're running a business.
Yeah. And you know, like we've got a new book coming out at the end of the year, so we've got a book tour to plan, but we very much do it around what still works for our family. So you know, trying to be kind to ourselves by not putting too many events in one go, because you know, there's a lot of energy involved in speaking at big events or meeting readers or doing readings. It's wonderful, but you know, you give a lot to it, so you have to be kind of realistic about how many of those you can do and still be, you know, a wife and a daughter and a mother at the same time. So my mum's amazing, because I think if it was me, I'd probably way overbook the amount of things that we would do, because I can, but she's the really grounded one. She's the one that's like, well, you know, that's not, you know, like, okay, well, we can try and do that, but if we can't, it doesn't really matter. That we can say to them, you know, maybe we could do it next year, or we can do it with that. She's so lovely in that respect, and I'm just always so proud of her, because we get messages all the time mainly from mums who you know, want her, and she always takes the time to answer every single query that we've had. And I know when she's even done stuff with Prima Baby magazine, you know, she often does their problems stuff for them, and talks to a mother about how to deal with quite a complicated issue. And I know that well after the article's been published, they phone her and they go, oh, thank you so much, and you know, it's really helped with this, but this has come up, and you know, she spends so much time offline dealing with it, because it's who she is. She's a nurse, she's a health visitor. Mothers and children and families are everything to her, and they always will be. So it's an incredible thing to watch, actually. I think it's probably her and how she works with parents has probably completely informed my approach to my life and my family and my work, in the same way that I'm now probably influencing my daughter and thinking about things. I'm sure I learned so much just watching my mum growing up.
Well, actually, even those softer things that we're talking about with brand, about brand being pervasive as well, in terms of every touch point that you have with your audience or with your clients, it sounds like your mum's a fantastic role model for that.
She is, you know, and as a health visitor, even now, she has been a health visitor since the mid-70s. And she says, you know, the day I go into a house and I think I know exactly what's going on and I can just tell them what to do, is the day I make an absolutely awful mistake. Just you can never learn, you never finish learning. Just you can never think. She has seen hundreds of thousands of babies and mothers, and she says, but I'm still learning, and I learn from my colleagues, I learn from the mothers. There's always something to learn. It's a sharing, supportive process. And I know a lot of the feedback I get from my clients and how I do branding with them is that we're doing it together. We're, you know, I'm on their side, I'm there to support them. I involve them in the creative process, so it's co-creative, rather than that old agency model, which is, look, ta-da, I've done it for you, but you don't understand it or know what to do with it. And I absolutely think that has influenced the whole of my life, because in my mum's book, Happy Baby, Happy Family, her whole thing is she talks about all the practical stuff of parenting, you know, the feeding and the sleep and the teething and the weaning. But what underlies all her advice is emotional development of the child, but also of the parents, and what's happening in those scenarios. And she always says that for children to be confident, they need to feel loved, they need to feel secure, they need to have new experiences, they need praise and recognition, and they need responsibility and boundaries. And I think that also applies to a lot of the time how I work with my clients and how I task myself, that people learn best and develop best when they feel confident and they feel included and they feel secure. And when you're doing something new for the first time, it's terrifying. So how you actually help people go through that, particularly if they're a startup or something like that, is so important. I know even when I planned our wedding, I thought about, oh, what of all the weddings that I've gone to and I've had a really bad time? Why have I had a bad time? And it was because I didn't know what to expect. I couldn't get to the loo. I couldn't get a drink. I didn't feel like it was worth going after all that effort and all that money. And I was determined that wasn't going to be how my guests felt. And I had so many letters afterwards from our guests saying, you know, it was one of the best days of their life, never mind our life. And I think that completely came from my mum and how she lives her life.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. And finally, just to wrap up, what would be your number one tip for any mums who are already running a business or thinking of running a business? What would be your standout piece of advice for them?
Ooh, that's such a huge question. My standout piece of advice would be a really good boss to yourself. Because I think a lot of us are so focused on what we haven't done, we don't look at what we've already achieved and what we are doing. And I think when I worked in the corporate world, I like to think that I was a really good boss for my team. I really cared about them. I really made sure that they got balance and they got support. And luckily, because I work with my mum, I get some of that from her. But if I didn't have her, I don't know how kind I would be to myself. And it's a constant thing. So I think be a really good boss to yourself.
That is a wonderful, wonderful piece of advice to end on, and so important. So be a really good boss to yourself. It's so succinct. But thank you very much, Amy. It's been an absolute pleasure to interview you. And if you could just share with us when the book's coming out and how people can connect with you if they want to connect with you on hearing the interview.
Lovely. So if you want to connect with me on brand, my business is wordsbycommunications.com. I'm on you can connect with me on Twitter at Amy I. Beeson. And I work with clients one-to-one, but also I've got a series of workshops coming up where people can do that branding stuff that I waffled on about in a day in small groups, so they also get a network of support, and it is not quite as expensive as having the completely customized branding. And then if you're interested in my mum and the books and all those things, that's at sarahbeeson.org. And our Twitter, which I'm more active on than my own Twitter, is at New Arrival Book. And the first memoir of my mum training to be a nurse in Hackney in the early 1970s, which is an absolute blast of a book, is The New Arrival. Her parenting book is called Happy Baby, Happy Family, Learning to Trust Yourself and Enjoy Your Baby. And our new book that's coming out that we're working on at the moment in 25th of August is called She's Arrived, and it's about my mum being a mid-20s just qualified health visitor in rural Kent and actually learning how to do her job. And it's lovely because it's set in the countryside, which is lovely for me because I live in London, so I get to fantasize that I'm in lovely Kent all day. And it's a really, really heartwarming book. So yeah, I'd love to hear from people. Please get in touch, whether it's about books or budding or parenting or just saying, I get that. That would be lovely.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time and agreeing to be interviewed today, Amy. It's been an absolute delight, and I wish you well with the new publication. Thank you.
Thanks.